What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy GS Luke here with our round 4 live stream for the Truist Championship. Gonna get you guys ready for all of your showdown exposure, going through a weather report, some shots gained metrics together, a look at how I'm going out there and crafting my player pool, as well as some strategy over there on DraftKings, including how you should be going out there and targeting your contest, as well as what you should do when you're actually putting together your lineup. So any questions, feel free to go ahead and let me know down in the chat. But the first thing I need you to do is to go ahead and smash that like button, and also to subscribe to the channel over here so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. But today ended up being a good day in the showdown streets for us. If you took a look at the morning versus the afternoon, you can see that the PM guys that we touted up yesterday played to about a 0.8 easier stroke average. And if you take a look at the low rounds of the day from the morning, they came from the exact kind of tee times that we pointed out. So if we sort it out there by today, you see Matsuyama had the low rounds and he teed off about 11 a.m. local time. Bridgman was a little bit before that at about 10:05, but both of those squarely within that Goldilocks zone that we were looking to for that leverage. So if you took that strategy, stacked mostly that second half of tee times, mixed in a few of those early guys for some leverage, it could have gone you onto the absolute nuts. Well, I didn't have the nuts. I didn't take down any of the GPPs that I entered. I did end up profitable on the day, which ended up being nice. And a lot of that comes down to that weather edge that we looked at. And though it is a similar weather day over there for tomorrow, similar type of tee times, I should say, over there for the final day, it is two sums off of hole number one. We're going to have those placement points in play. So any sort of weather edge for tomorrow, you can't really go all in on. Speaking of, though, let's take a look at this weather forecast where you can see for the first hour or so, it's going to be cooler about 7, 8 a.m. I believe they're starting at 8, so going off when it's mostly warmed up already. So I don't think the temperatures are going to be as big a factor. Today, for the first maybe 4 hours of play, it was a lot colder than what you had later on, which is why you had such a drastic difference in the scoring. So with it being a little bit flatter tomorrow, the wind's also not really kicking up all that much there in the afternoon. I think scoring could be slightly favorable towards the later guys, but I don't think it's the actual conditions that are going to be favorable. If anything, I'd rather have some of these late morning guys that are going to have more receptive greens than what they have in the afternoon. But the talent level and the form of those guys that are going off later on are going to make up for that, in my opinion. So in terms of the morning versus afternoon splits, I think it's going to be close to even out there on Sunday. But because we have the placement points in play from the strategy perspective, you're going to need some of those later starters because of the bump that they get with their projections. If you have players starting in the top 5, top 10, they're going to be priorities over there in your optimizers. You're going to get a lot of those guys by default, kind of like you did for today. But those late morning guys, so just to show you some of those tee times over here, this is where you can get the leverage in your lineup. So I'm starting about 9:30, where I would start looking for those players. It's warmed up by then. You've got some legit studs on this portion of the board. It's not even like you have to use a pure slapdick in the 6K range to go out there and get this leverage. You can use a legit stud. You've got Minwoo Lee, a Victor Hovland in this range, a Robert McIntyre who's squarely in that 7K range, Zal Torres, Aaron Rye, who's usable, all of the studs, even the mid to lower tier guys. If you want to be real bold about it and trying to find somebody that is sub 10% owned, you could use in this portion of the tee time board. So you're going to need some later guys just because it is a Sunday showdown slate. But with the slightly more receptive conditions, you could see a few rounds like what you had from Hideki and Bridgman today. Not to say that you're going to get those, exact two players out there in every single lineup. But if you're using a set of 150 lineups and you're using maybe a handful, 5 to 7 players that are going off early, if you can hit on one or even two of those guys and get a -4 or -5 round, that's how you find yourselves towards the top end of the GPPs. So we'll mention the strategy aspect later, how you can go and find some of that leverage when you need it. But let's focus on the player pool before we do so. And the main thing I like to look at is the same as what we do for rounds 2 and 3. Take a look at some of the round 3 ball striking stats primarily, but I'll also incorporate some of the full event stuff as well. So because we have a full 54 hole sample size at this course, it's all at the same exact event, right? It's not like it's coming from the last event before that or anything. It's all for this specific golf course. You can look at that for making some of your conviction plays up top, but to find some of those lower owned players that are going off early, I really like to look at these round 3 stats. So let's start over here with the ball striking tab. And I'm not so much looking for guys that are in that top 5, because if you're in the top 5 at this point, your ball striking for the week has been on point most days. I'm trying to find some diamonds in the rough here. So Brian Campbell, he's towards the middle end of the board. He's got the kind of tee time that would make sense for this. Ryan Gerard, you can see he also gained over 2 strokes over there with the ball striking. Both of them were okay with the putter today, not carrying their game though by any means. Minwoo Lee, he hit the ball well, but lost over 3 strokes with the putter. He could be a look for some leverage at T46. Austin Eckroat might be a little bit too grimy of a play over there at +1, but his ball striking was favorable with losing about 3 strokes putting. And Alex Noren here over a shots gained over there at the ball striking categories, but lost 3 strokes over there with the flat stick. These would be the sort of players that if you're looking to get a grimy play down low, I'm playing at least 2 or 3 of those guys, I'd imagine, out there in my player pool. And while I haven't quite built my player pool yet, so I don't know exactly who those guys are going to be, those are the first few candidates that I'm going to go through for that kind of thing. And it's not even just those kind of plays. I'll look for some short game regression candidates. I'll also look for just high upside players, so high birdie percentage, good par 5 scores to go out there and throw into lineups as well. Because if a guy that's going off early is going to get there in terms of a DraftKings optimal, it's going to be because they made 7 or 8 birdies, because they had a birdie streak out there at some point, potentially even a bogey-free round to add on top of that. If you go out there and you score in terms of raw DraftKings fantasy scoring, you need players that have the kind of firepower to get there. Your Kuchers, your Kisners of the world that are more of par specialists out here on tour at this point would not be the sort of players that you'd want to take going off early. Neither of those players are in this field, so you don't have to worry about those 2 in particular, but it's that type of player that you want to avoid. The more conservative, lower birdie percentage players out there on tour are ones that I wouldn't be using as chasers. I'm more so looking for the players that are a little bit more aggressive about it. So Siwoo Kim kind of comes to mind there. Minwoo Lee is also a high birdie percentage player. And just to sort this out here by leaderboard, I'll get a sip of my Red Bull here as well to try and find some of the more aggressive guys going off early, like a Cam Davis, for example. He's the number 3 birdie or better percentage player on all the PGA Tour. You have, I believe, Rory and Scotty Scheffler are the 2 players that are ranking ahead of him. And then you've got Cam Davis. So a T38, he might be one of those players I'd look to in that situation. Hovland's a high birdie percentage guy. He hasn't even had the best year other than his 1 win over there at Valspar, but he's a number 11 birdie or better percentage player on the PGA Tour. I love to go Bear. That's a grimy one too, though, because he's +1 now. He is an extremely high birdie percentage guy, though. Those would be the kind of players that you might want to add on top of that as well. So that's what I'm looking for out there for some of that leverage. When I'm trying to find my conviction plays towards the top end of the board, that's where I'm looking at the full event stuff. So we've got this sorted by the leaderboard right now. And what you'll see at the top end is that Shane Lowry's got the most shots gained ball striking, also the most shots gained approach. So if I'm looking for a conviction play, that immediately stands out. Also, the fact that Sepp Straka's gained over 7 strokes putting to this point is a little bit of a red flag over there with the other guy at T1. Justin Thomas continues to hit the ball well without making a whole bunch of putts. Today, he did flip that a bit. He ended up going out there and gaining about 2 strokes putting. So he's got another decent stat profile. Shane Lowry, my favorite of what we've seen here so far. Keith Mitchell is now balanced across the board, but that is partially because he lost strokes putting today, which is not surprising based on how well he putted the first few days. The question mark now is whether he has another struggle bus out there tomorrow, or if he potentially bounces back after losing those 3 shots gained putting. That's kind of a tough one to narrow down. I would side towards him bouncing back after having that rough round. You also have guys like Hideki up here that gained a bunch of strokes today. He's been balanced, only losing off the tee, as you can see there. But of the shots gained profiles that we've gone through, guys like JT, Shane Lowry really sticking out as players that I'll probably get over the field on. And these players like a Sam Burns that are gaining 5 strokes putting, potential fade candidates out there in my player pool. So I'm a huge proponent of going after that ball striking security, that consistency out there from day to day, and fading a lot of that variance with the short game. So for example, Tony Finau, who's doing it mostly with the putter, that doesn't stand out as a very sustainable kind of shots gained profile. A Jacob Bridgman gaining over 6 strokes with the putter and then losing in the other 3 categories. That is a massive red flag if I've ever seen one before. That's how I use the full event stuff to my advantage. And it's most mostly with these guys towards the top. Whereas the round 3 stuff, the more specific you go with the data, is where I'm trying to find some of my lower owned plays. So that's how I use the shots gained out there to my advantage. If there's any specific players that you were curious about and how they either played today or potentially over the entire event, you can let me know down in the live chat and I'll get back to that here in just a little bit. But that gives you the general sense over there. And it's not a complete, something that I live by. It's not like an absolute steadfast rule that I go out there and use. But in general, these ball strikers are the guys that I plant my flag behind. And there will always be exceptions based on narrative, especially when it's a newer guy out there on tour that hasn't proven themselves under the gun. But all these guys at the top, with the exception of a Keith Mitchell, have proven it before. You've got major winners up there. You've got Sepp Straka, who's won 3 times. You've got Shane Lowry, who he's choked a few times over the last few years, but he's been in contention enough where I'm not really worried about it out there with Shano. Everyone up here is a stud. So you got to use the shots gained metrics to weed through them a little bit. So let me know if there's anyone that you're curious about, whether it's ownership, any of that sort of stuff. But in terms of the contests that are available, they're a little bit bigger than rounds 2 and 3. So for the DraftKings board, they're at least giving us bigger payouts, but they're not the best in terms of the payout structure. You can see over here in the big 5-5-5, you have a 20% to first place, which isn't the worst GPP that I've seen, but especially in a big payout kind of contest like that, it's not my favorite. Over here in the $25 GPP, it is also a 5th over there to first place, which is sub-ideal, but you're not going to see me max entering that contest all that often. I'm more so looking at this 30K contest, this $5 GPP, where it's $750 to go out there and max enter it. This one is a 6th to first place, so it's a little bit better than that 5th to first, but not by all that much. You also have a lot of single entries that you'll see me playing in, whether it's the $33, the $12 single entries that you have. This one, a little bit over 10% to first, a flat payout structure afterwards on there. Let me see if I can find the $12 one as well, because that's one that I'm sure a lot of you guys might be eyeing up. This one is exactly 10% out there to first place, and the flat payout structure for the top 5, top 10, that is going to make you feel good about your payout if you go out there and you can put together a solid lineup. So in those kind of contests, we got to worry about the lineup construction now, which you want to cater out there to the event that you're entering and the contest that you're trying to take down. Because if you're entering in just a few hundred entry contest, you don't have to get that wild out there with the ownership. Whereas if you're trying to take down the $5 or the $25 GPP, you've really got to be focused on the ownership when we get to this segment. So what we're going to do here is we're going to build for that $5, $25 GPP to talk you through the thought process when it comes to putting together a GPP build, which is a little bit different than what we have for rounds 2 and 3. What makes this process a little bit different than some of the other rounds that we face is that out here for round number 4, we have those placement points. And I would say a good general rule of thumb is that you want at least 2-3 guys starting in the top 10. And then the rest of your lineup is where it's kind of dependent on the contest that you're entering. If you're in a GPP, you want at least 1 or 2 pivots out there in your lineups that are going to give you that differentiation to the field. And then you have like 2 spots, maybe 1 spot in your lineup on top of that, where you've got a little bit more leeway, where it could be an in-betweener, maybe even another piece of chalk up there towards the top. If you are going to take another piece of chalk, though, in that scenario, you better have some low-owned pivots with those 1 or 2 that you've already mixed in. So let's start off with some of that chalk towards the top. And we're going to throw 2 guys starting in the top 10, and then we're going to throw 1 guy on the fringe of the top 10 out there as our third quote unquote placement point guy. So I'm going to start with a JT. I'm going to throw a, let's see, in terms of these guys that are a little bit cheaper, I'm trying to find somebody that's like 85, like maybe $8,000 to go out there and play. Let's throw in a Keith Mitchell. I'm going to say he doesn't choke on Sunday for once, which is playing with fire, but we'll play the short game regression game out there with the 3 shots gained he lost on the greens today. I am hesitant about this, though. On the broadcast, he was shaking his wrist a bit. I'm not sure if he has done an interview yet and talked about what was going on there. I'm going to take him out of there for now just because of the wrist issue. But if he does say in the media that it wasn't an issue, it was just like a nagging thing or something, I'll be firing him into some of my lineups. But for now, let's go with the Hideki Matsuyama, who also gives us those placement points and maybe not as good of a stat profile as what you had with Keith Mitchell, but still somebody that I could see using in some of my exposure. So let's start with those 2 as our main 2 guys with the ownership there. It's not like the ownership's a good thing. It's that we need guys that are starting in position, and those guys are going to carry some of that ownership as well. And now let's use one of those fringe guys. So either a T11 here, maybe even a T16 player that we're still trying to get top 5, top 10 placement from, but they're not going to be quite as chalky as what you have here towards the top. And the reason why we're choosing to do this rather than going up here and taking another guy starting in the top 5 is that the ownership difference from these guys up top, like a Lowry, a Straka, who I'm assuming in my projections are going to be like 35, maybe 40% owned out there in contests, is that these guys a little bit further down, you might find closer to 10 to 15% ownership. And that matters in the big GPPs. If we were in a single entry, only a couple hundred entry contest, you wouldn't have to worry about it as much. You could go out there, throw in a Sepp Straka. You could throw in a Shane Lowry, who, if I was going to take one of the really chalky guys on the slate, Shane Lowry might be my favorite. And maybe just to show you how you can make this work, let's throw Shane Lowry into this lineup. And what this is going to do in the big GPP is it's going to make our life a lot harder than what we want it, because now we only have 3 spots to get all of the leverage in our lineups, because these 3 guys up top are like 30% owned. We're going to be getting 0 leverage whatsoever on those 3. There's going to be a just a ton of lineups out there that are going to start with those exact 3 players together. So we're really going to have to get different down low. So we're going to throw in a Robert McIntyre to get a little bit different with the ownership. Let's throw in and McIntyre's shots gained metrics aren't great, but he is an aggressive, high birdie percentage player when he's playing good golf. He's got a late morning tee time as well, so I think that could be advantageous. Let's throw in a Thomas Dietrich here as well. I've got him most likely being under that 7% ownership mark. And then for your last man in, because we stretched it a little bit by taking 3 guys starting in the top 5, you might even want to consider leaving salary on the table here, because that core of 3 players is going to be so popular that even taking a McIntyre Dietrich here might not be enough when it comes to that leverage. So that's why I choose to avoid that kind of a start, and why I get a little bit more leverage out there into my build. So rather than going with that Shane Lowry build up there, if we were going to get a little bit different about it, you could go to a Keith Mitchell. I already mentioned there's maybe a little bit of a red flag with his injury around that sort of one. But like a Tommy Fleetwood further down the board over here at T11, that would be somebody that's significantly lower owned than what you have with Shane Lowry. He's also only $100 cheaper, and you're getting some leverage at that portion there. And now with your last man in, you have $100 more to spend, which isn't the biggest deal, but now you also don't have to leave salary on the table. If you wanted to spend all of your money at $7,300, you could. If you want to leave $100 or $200 on the table and really ensure that you're going to duplicate yourself less likely, make sure that you have a little bit more leverage out there from your lineup construction, you can do that out there as well. I would just say that the bigger the contest, the more leverage that you're going to need out there in your builds. You're still going to need placement points regardless of the contest that you're entering. It's just that you prioritize them a little bit more when you're in those smaller contests. And if you're in a cash contest, you should be taking guys starting in the top 5, top 10 for pretty much all 6 spots. It's a different game when you're just going out there and trying to beat 50% of the field. But in these GPPs, I'll remind you guys of what we're actually trying to do. You want to win first place when you're entering the $5 or the $25. There's such top heavy contests. They're 20% out there to first place that if you're not winning top 5 in those contests, you're not really going to reap the benefits of them long term. They have high rakes. They've got the most entries that you've got to go out there and play against. You've also got 150 maxers that are also taking up a lot of space in those contests. That makes it tough to go out there and find a lot of success. So if you're in those contests, play for first place, right? If you're not first, you're the last. That kind of mantra truly should be what you're using out there when you're going through your lineup construction. And that means being bold. That means leaving salary on the table at times to ensure that you're not going to be duplicated, because the worst thing you can do is not have leverage and pretty much have an impossible job of moving up the leaderboards. Just have to be perfect to go out there and take it down. You don't really want to have to be perfect to go and actually win first place. Or on the other aspect that would suck is if you duplicate yourself in first, you're handicapping your payout so much because they're top heavy contests and that first place equity is such a big deal. When you find the nuts, which is tough to do, regardless of whatever fantasy sport you're playing, you want to get the full benefit of doing so. So make sure that you're not duplicating yourself. Make sure that when you get plays correct, that you're moving up those leaderboards and not moving up with 30% of the field at a time. That would be my best recommendation qualification for round number 4. So best of luck out there with any exposure that you guys are getting to, but it's in the GPPs or some of the smaller field stuff. I hope to see your names out there towards the top. I'm going to be entering the $100 single entry, $33, $12, and $5 out there for tomorrow, and then 50 lineups out there into the big $5 GPP. So if you guys want to find me in contests, that's where you can find me for Sunday's exposure. Best of luck out there with everything else that you're going with, unless you're playing against me in those contests. If so, I hope you guys finish in 3rd, 4th place, 2nd place out there as runner-up. But I've got my eye out there on 1st place. Let's see if there's any last-second questions. If not, we're going to hop on out of here. What's going on, Ryan? What's going on, Joseph? He's like, Killer Keith looks like he's going to cry. Yeah, man. Someone's got to let me know about that wrist injury he's got going on, but that was crazy. He said, great showdown day. Got the W in 5th. That's great to hear, Brian. It was a good one over here as well. How does Cole grade for tomorrow? So let's take a look at the Eric Cole stat profile, which he hit a lot of greens today. Through his first 16 holes, he had hit 15 of his 16. So not surprising that he gained over 2 or nearly 2.5 strokes with the iron play. He sets up well because he gained with the iron play, gained off the tee, and then lost strokes over there with the putter. With the shots gained profile here, he's like an 8.5 out of 10. It's not perfect. Ideally, he'd be a little bit better off the tee, but it's close to it. He's playing well for sure. He said, hitting on props on the easiest sport to hit props on has become difficult. I don't know about you, man. I had a good prop day today. So hey, bad days happen for you. If that happened for you, hopefully tomorrow's better, but I have not found it that way. Do I think that Decky can go low again tomorrow? You think he can? I think he's got it in him. He's one of the best Sunday players that we have out here in the PGA Tour. He's wears yellow on Sundays. He's the clutchest player that we see out there with the lead. I wouldn't say that he's like chalk that I'm 100% going to play, but he's one of those guys up top that very likely is going to make his way into my player pool. I fade some of the newcomers. I fade some of the guys that I think are going to be nervous on Sundays, and Hideki's immune to being nervous. The guy is like an absolute robot, and I mean that in the most polite and the most complimentary way possible. He's an absolute stud. I have no idea what this guy's saying about his prop stuff in chat, but hey, Godspeed and best of luck out there for Sunday. But hopefully it goes well for all of our exposure. I'm looking forward to it. I've got some main slate sweats. I've also got some placement bet sweats that I'm going out there and sweating. Hopefully it treats you guys just as nicely out there.